how much the small means, like the ticket price.
Yeah.
Satisfy the need of return from the capital market per se.
Welcome to the podcast collaborations between Money Meets Mission and NGOPI, the podcast that delve into the world of impact and sustainability. So this is very special podcast series of collaborations between AVPN, the foremost impact investor network in Asia, that dedicated to moving capital towards impact, and also GoTo Impact Foundations, the impact catalyst on missions to cultivate innovations ecosystem for sustainable impact at speed and scale. I'm your host, Dini Indrawati Septiani, Southeast Asia Regional Director of AVPN.
And I'm your co-host, Monica Oudang, Chairperson of GoTo Impact Foundation.
So we are very honored to have Christina Maynes, the Southeast Asia Regional Head of Women World Bank. So please, Christina, to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I come from an American but global nonprofit, and we have a global team. We have a team of 10 in Indonesia, and what we focus on is making sure that women from the low-income segment are able to access formal financial services. So we do it through a variety of ways. We work on advisory projects, we do research so that we can provide data to regulators and policymakers, and then we work together with policymakers. And in fact, we have been co-leaders of an Indonesian coalition on women and digital financial capability. So many different levers, but ultimately the goal is to make sure that women have access to formal financial services, and through that they become economically empowered. And then one last thing, we actually have a private equity arm and Women's World Banking Asset Management, and they have just over 150 million in 2 funds, and lots of blended finance in that we can talk about later. So thanks.
So, Christina, I think because today's topic is blended finance, and maybe blended finance is a new term, especially for the Indonesian market.
Absolutely.
Maybe you can start by sharing a little bit what is blended finance, and maybe give, since you have a team in Indonesia and then you've done a lot of work in Indonesia, maybe you can also share what is a concrete example of blended finance and works in Indonesia.
Absolutely. So, my earliest days in Indonesia were in the 1990s, and I was a banker. And so I think the first thing that people always think about is debt and equity, and, is it impact equity, or is it development financial institution equity, or is it just plain old commercial equity, and then all sorts of kinds of debt. So at Women's World Banking, on our asset management side, in our funds, we have a variety of blended finance. So we have some tranches where the lender or the equity holder may take first loss. So that means the impact investor gets priority on the payments. And then also some of the interesting things to our second fund is we have a technical assistance facility from a couple of international government institutions, including USAID, $5 million over 10 years. And they use that to both do sort of assessments of where the investee companies are in terms of hiring women, in terms of serving women customers, providing opportunities for growth within the firms. Sometimes with fintechs, a lot of the issue is whether lending algorithms are biased. So, that's sitting outside the fund, but that's a classic example of technical assistance that's, what we call blended finance. So then moving over to our side of the business, we use donor funds. Essentially, I call it downscaling of products. So if you think about Indonesia, 40% of the banking system is run by some state-owned banks, BRI, BNI, Mandiri. So what we do is we actually say, you guys have the customers, you guys have the products, but let's just talk about perhaps, how do you serve women clients? What do they need? Can we tweak the products? Can we talk about different ways of having the customer journey suit women? And that's what the Donors Fund is to do. And then at the end of that project, we've proven to the bank that it's profitable, and then they roll it out and they continue on. So that's a very different kind of blended finance, but a really important one in Indonesia, and one that we've had a lot of success with.
So you mentioned that you have 25 years working experience in the financial sectors, right? So you mentioned about your contributions previously on how to provide data, and also you must be also understand about the barrier and also the challenges on how to engaging with several stakeholders to do a blended finance together, right? The same mission, the same objective, and how they understand the importance of their role going forward. So would you mind to also tell us the story?
I guess my immediate response to that is, are they all on the same table? Because we have so many different stakeholders with so many different objectives. And so I do think that one of the most important things about getting a bunch of stakeholders together is to make sure that the objectives are clear and it's understood. And so I think that that is why what we do with our investee companies is that we make sure that we sit on the board and that we have a voice. Because people may start the journey and say this, the debt holder believes this and the equity holder believes that. But actually, as the business goes along, you have some very hard commercial decisions to make. Is something working out? Do you make a strategic shift? And so I think that's where, starting from the beginning and saying, this is our goal to reach X million women. This is our goal to make sure that our loan portfolio grows like that. Those are very important things to start the journey with so that you can make sure you get to the end.
So how's the context from the Southeast Asia context, for example? Maybe you can share a little bit. What is your experience? Because your positions for World Bank, Women World Bank is part of it.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about when we talk to clients initially. So on the advisory side, for instance, we'll go and talk to a financial institution, and I have to say that a certain portion of our clients, this is part of their DNA. They feel that if they were not founded to serve low-income customers, that they at least have made a strategic priority on that basis. But for the rest of the financial services company that we talk to, so often we hear the same thing in Southeast Asia. And it doesn't matter whether it's Indonesia or Vietnam or Cambodia, but the woman is the CFO of the household. She works very hard and she has great respect. But when you actually dig down and you talk to women alone in their household and say, really, who does get the final choice? Quite oftentimes, you'll find out that they still have to ask permission to the men. And so that's something that's very important, and we recognize that in some of the projects that we do, that, everybody has their way of living, and so sometimes it's just normal part of the culture that a woman should talk to her husband and say, I want to become a banking agent. Is this, going to work out? This is what I'm going to do to take care of the children and our parents, and there'll still be balance in our home. And so those are things that we think about.
You mentioned earlier, right, that from your side you have an impact investment arm. You also have sort of donor-funded initiatives. Out of curiosity, how do you, I guess in a very broad terms, right, what are the different criteria for your organization to decide which project actually falls under which bucket, right? And to that, do you actually support really small initiatives? Because off-cam we were discussing how blended finance is predominantly used for projects that are big scale and sometimes miss the mark in actually helping the ones that really need access to capital.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So like many organizations like ourselves, so Women's World Banking and Axion, Our private equity arms are very separate, and
Okay.
so that's really a very different kettle of fish. But in terms of how to get money to smaller things, we do sometimes have our major grant holders are interested in us working with local organizations. So, for instance, when we did our Indonesia Coalition, there's actually a facility for civil society organizations, and we give very small grants out of that. And I have to say, I've seen the impact of some of the grants. We gave a small nonprofit organization in East Java some money to teach women how to market their handicrafts and their products better. And it's amazing what a small amount of money could do to women in a village to make their products more attractive.
Maybe you can also mentions about how much the small means, like the ticket price.
I think for that situation, it was the grants coming from that were generally about $5,000 to $10,000 US, and the whole facility is probably around 100,000 or so. And also sometimes those grants are specifically given so that we are supporting a local small firm that perhaps is training trainers how to teach digital financial capability, or perhaps they're helping us do some research in the field and they're honing their research skills. So there are many different ways. I think it has to be a sub-grantee of a large grant. And so my advice to situations like that is, go talk to the embassies that you're close to, talk to some of the development organizations and find out who might be interested in giving a small grant in your segment.
So in that sense, right, I guess you brought up a very good point. That means that there needs to be an intermediary, right, that becomes sort of an aggregator of all of these different smaller scale projects that can be accountable. I guess accountability is one of the key criteria in terms of delivering a mechanism of delivering this blended finance instrument. Going back to the concept of blended finance, how blended finance is basically, from your side, it's a blend of multiple different capital, right? There's a philanthropic, there's institutional. When you provide out grants, right, how do you then satisfy the need of return from the capital market per se?
So are we talking about the equity holders, or are we talking about the donors that are funding our advisory projects? Yeah. So, very much we are accountable to our donors, and different donors have different strategies and priorities. For the most part, though, we track very much two things. One is we call it women reached, so that women that would have access to the financial services and products that we do. And then the second one is the women that are engaged. So it's not enough that they had the training, perhaps, if we're training a midwife to teach pregnant mothers to have savings accounts and save money for their child's birth. It's not just that the pregnant women were asked whether they'd like a savings account. It's whether they did, whether they show a pattern of savings over time. And so it's something that more and more donors really track very carefully and want to see the metrics on it.
So I think metrics then becomes so metrics and accountability then becomes really, really crucial, especially in this type of environment.
Exactly. And then even beyond that, the next step after, reach and then, usage then moves on to how does it change the women's overall agency and perception of herself? I mean, aside from being financially capable, does she employ more people in the community? How does she feel within her household? And so there are many different elements that our funders look for.
I think it's very, very important because this is the perspective not from impact investing, but from the philanthropist perspective, right? So I think like the impact measurement and valuations of the framework of on how beneficial engaging with gender equality initiative, for example, on how maybe you can explain more on about the impact measurement and the variable of what kind of type of project we can say that this becomes successful, for example.
Oh. Well, and that's where it gets really interesting. So for some of our donors, for them, what they're really looking for is just to say that women have been reached and that some of them are using the product. For some of our donors, what is really critical is to make sure that the advisory project proves that the product is commercially viable and that it will roll out. And so that's something that we've had very good success with in Southeast Asia in the past 4 years, is that most of our projects, once we're completed, when we completed the pilot, we go to the financial institution and we show them the net value of the clients. So some of the projects we've done, we've seen like an 8 times revenue growth over the client that was served. And so some donors, quite rightfully so, they want to make sure that you're not just doing a one-off project and you walk away. They want to make sure that the financial institution takes it forward. So to give you an example, we did a project in Cambodia with Wingbank, with women factory workers. And when we first started, it was a bit of a gamble. It was in the middle of COVID and they only had about 100,000 women that were on payroll accounts. But now, they have over 250,000 women in payroll accounts, and they've rolled out that project. So all of the women that have a payroll account now go through the same program. And so from a donor's perspective, that's where you've really delivered as a nonprofit. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned also from example in Cambodia. Is there any very interesting example, success story, not only in Cambodia but also in Vietnam, Thailand? Very because I believe that gender is
everywhere.
Everyone wants to, we need to work together, to make this.
Yeah. So in terms of Southeast Asia, our 2 main markets are Indonesia and Cambodia. And so we're actually just starting our first project in Vietnam, which we're really excited about. It's trying to have women that have household businesses. So maybe they produce handicrafts in their home, or maybe they run a small hotel. Maybe they sell food at a roadside stall next to their house or something. Trying to provide them access to formal loans. So not to go to a black market lender, and maybe they haven't had loans before. So, it's really interesting to see how things are different. For instance, in Indonesia, there are agents everywhere, right? You can find a GoTo agent anywhere, right? And BNI, BRI, all over the place. But in Vietnam, they don't have banking agents in the same way. And so, how do you reach these women in the household is very, important, because you don't have agent banking.
What do you think is your biggest challenge in terms of reaching these women, right? I think, from our experience, I think you brought up cultural perspective early on about, women still having to ask, the husband still have the final say at the end of the day. But beyond that, what are the primary, hindrance for women to actually adopt solutions, right?
Right.
And is that something that you see common across the region, or local culture actually still plays a bigger role in terms of that?
Interesting question. So absolutely, the number one challenge for women in Southeast Asia and in using financial services is the lack of digital financial capability. And so that can mean many things. I mean, for some women, it's right down to, in Indonesia, the phone is the last to reach them at night. The husband takes the phone during the day, the kids have the phone after school, and so the woman gets the phone at night. And so, she has very little time on the phone, and knowing how to do Facebook is not the same as knowing how to do a remittance or a payment on a mobile app. So that's really number one, is having access to the phone. The second is just having the skills, and that's something that we always do. And so what we do in our work is to make sure that we find a trusted advisor in most of our projects. So whether it's a factory team leader or whether it's a midwife, something like that, somebody that she feels comfortable with. Almost always it's women, and we often use the technique of sort of see one, do one. So whether you have a promoter or whether you have a team leader, the team leader shows the woman how to do it and then says, you do it, and the bank provides it for free, and that gets her on her way. And then also we use just very simple little things like tracking cards, giving women a goal, like a savings goal and a card, 10 weeks of savings to get to a goal. You'd be amazed at something that seems so simple is really generates a lot of change in a woman's savings patterns. And that ultimately provides her with a financial cushion so that in the case of COVID coming back, or loss of a job, or perhaps a fire in the village, all of these things will give them a bit of safety to fall back on.
So this is explaining about the importance on how philanthropies think,
Indeed.
in terms of the blended finance financial scheme, right? So it's really helping the bottom of the pyramids of the project.
Empowering the women. Empowering is a big deal.
Right? So,
I mean, if I can talk to that, it's interesting because I have tried to talk to private donors about why they would want to support a project. And it's very interesting because I would say on the one hand, part of it is the governance and compliance. They're giving a lot of money to somebody else, and they say things like, one of our donors, which was a foundation, a corporate foundation, the men on the board said to me, why am I giving money to a financial institution that in some respects is a competitor to us? But they're a competitor in corporate bonds and in private equity. They're not a competitor in sort of micro retail. And so I think people have to sort of think about where they see needs in the financial services system and how we can grow the pie to serve a customer segment that really, is there and ready to be served. You just have to change your delivery a little bit different. You have to change your perceptions about women as a customer.
So in that sense, in Indonesia specifically, right, and looking at women in Indonesia, what do you believe, has been or would be the greatest financial instrument to actually help them? Because if we look at Indonesia, right, I think the majority of the backbone of Indonesian economy, I think over 80% are the MSMEs, right? And the majority of the MSMEs are owned by women. So, I guess in looking back at your products that you currently offer, what do you think the Indonesian market would really benefit in terms of the female entrepreneur at that scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a clarification. So Women's World Banking, we're a nonprofit, and so we don't actually provide any products. It's always the financial institution that does it. So we don't underwrite. We don't pay that. It's understandable. The name is difficult.
In terms of you come across multiple different financial products.
Absolutely.
Right?
I'll answer the question.
So I'm just curious, what have you seen have worked, right? And
so let me just jump in there. So one of the things that we work with financial institutions is they say, it's really hard to get these women SMEs as clients. Like, we don't know how to bring them in. And so some of the things that we've seen, somebody was telling me one time that she saw a poster from a bank and it showed, a fisherman with his boat, and it was, advertising an MSME loan. And so for the most women, that doesn't relate to them. I mean, a boat is, a piece of collateral for a loan. So the answer to your question in terms of women SMEs, there are many, many in Indonesia. but their businesses are such they don't tend to have collateral to back them. And what women often need is like loan to buy inventory. So, perhaps they get goods for their small shop, and so they get it from the same supplier, so they need a supply chain loan. And so perhaps they need working capital, perhaps they need what we call hospital cash insurance. So if they have a child or if they fall sick, that, if they miss a day of work, that they know that there'll be a cushion there in terms of their earnings. So I would probably say it's credit, but responsible credit, not credit at 51% interest a month, but, supply chain credit from perhaps a large corporate. And there we can talk about philanthropic donors. There are an awful lot of conglomerates in Indonesia that have supply chains. Perhaps they already, offer supply chain credits. The question is perhaps they could work with you to see how they could do that at a more micro or ultra micro level, and to help these women really build their businesses.
So, I also would like to touch a bit about the role of government on how to be crucial and very important on this engagement.
Indeed.
Experience from your perspective as well.
Oh my goodness. We certainly work with many different ministries, and I think there are probably a couple of things. I think first and foremost, as we always say in the business, you don't know whether you're doing well or doing poorly unless you track something. And so one of our key rally cries around the world at Women's World Banking is the collection of gender disaggregated data and the use of it. So in Indonesia, already the regulators are collecting that kind of data for the large banks. But when you actually go in and talk to a large bank and you say, are you looking at the differences between whether a woman and a man who have the same credit score are getting the same, amount for a loan? They say they don't know, and it's quite common. And
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
I'm
please
just
go.
curious,
Yeah.
right, in how that should be part of like credit risk assessment, right?
It is. Yeah.
Are you saying that the gender lens is not implemented in credit risk assessment?
I think it's something that financial institutions need to double check, because bias can creep into credit algorithms or credit scoring, and it sometimes depends on who wrote the credit assessment system. It could be an app, or it could just be a process internally. But like I said, it used to be known that, for instance, an app would give a higher credit score to somebody who seemed to be moving around during the day. But for many women who have ultra micro businesses, their business is in their home because they're taking care of the children and the family and the household. And so if that app is looking for the woman to leave the home, if she does have a phone, she's not leaving the phone. And so therefore, does she get, does her credit score go down because of that?
So what do you think, I guess in specifically that example, right? Like, which stakeholder can actively participate more to make these changes happen, right? In order to bring equality in terms of financial access, especially for women in the MSME world.
I think that there are so many ministries that can play a role. It's certainly not limited to OJK, which tracks the gender disaggregated data. I think the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection works closely with many, many different ministries, whether it's Bappenas or the Ministry of Finance, OJK, BI. But there also think about some of the things that we do. For instance, who tracks in Indonesia registration of businesses, and how easy is it for women to register her business? Or in terms of when the business grows larger, her earnings and her tax has to be verified. And so, is there a unified ability system to go and get that tax data easily if you're the financial services provider? So there are so many different things that go into a financial services provider deciding to give somebody credit. They have to do a lot of back checks. How easy do we make it? And then finally for women, the KYC process. You know, it should be easy, but you know, from our experience, sometimes for women it really is difficult for them on a mobile phone to pass the KYC. Yeah.
How important do you think the private sector's role in this? And if yes, you know, what role can they play? Because I think a lot of it that you mentioned is more on the public sector side, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how do you see the private sector sort of intertwine in this matter?
So for me, I guess I kind of wonder, you know, to me, all banks are really private sector if they're listed. So it may be a bank that is majority state-owned, but to me, they're very much private sector and a private sector solution. You know, we've worked with all sorts of firms. So in Indonesia, we did our first all-digital solution with Dana. And I have to thank Vince Iswara for having faith in us, because we started right in the middle of COVID. And we did a project where we sought out to get domestic workers, so maids in Indonesian households, to teach themselves how to send a digital remittance home to their families. And we had fantastic results, and that's very much private sector. And, you know, Dana has been a great supporter of women's banking in Southeast Asia all along the way.
Okay, so the context of blended finance, because I think your role actually very important in terms of giving grants for the bottom of the pyramids. But on what state actually the impact investors will comes in after, you know, what? You know,
actually, it's the other.
This is you know, this is the discussions of blended finance, right? So and then all of us actually agree that the importance of, you know, engaging with the philanthropic, philanthropies,
right,
to supporting this kind of financial scheme, right? But then, on what stage, you know, and then impact investors or you know, like private sectors or incorporate giving like loan or equity and
so actually I would sort of say it's the other way around. So our private equity arm is backing, you know, the startups and some of the early stage businesses. And so I think it depends in the private equity world, sort of which stage of a company's growth are you supporting. So from Women's World Banking's perspective, we're working, you know, mainly with fintechs that are really small or just growing. So for instance, we have an investment in Amarta, which has grown enormously since I remember when I first was talking to them. I think they had about 400,000 customers, and now they're huge. And in fact, I mean, around Southeast Asia, most fintechs that I know, whether we invest in them or not, they all are, over time, they grow into banks these days. I think it's just part and parcel of having a broader product group, and regulators, as you grow, they want to make sure that you're fully regulated, and so they usually end up with a banking license. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is an amazing discussion, and
yes.
I think it's an eye-opening for me, you know, in terms of how things actually get assessed and how things get implemented, and the importance of rethinking and undoing a lot of the things that we have actually developed.
Well, congratulations on the work the GoTo Foundation has done. It's, you know, really sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we can inspire all, like, you know, big corporations, big stakeholders to
come together,
blend together, you know, make collaborations, and they know the importance of their role on how to make this happen in the future as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take
care.
Okay. Coming here.
Thank you.